billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. I just want to take a couple moments and share a few reflections on this concept of it's sort of like a concept of spiritual immunity. Now, before I talk about spiritual immunity, I want us to think for a moment about what it is that we're observing around us right now. So in this pandemic that we're going through, we're hearing news stories, we're hearing a lot of numbers. And one of the strangest things that I think that we're all kind of scratching our heads about, and that's very difficult to understand, is that how this same virus can affect different people so differently. So we know that, for example, we've heard cases where some people will get ill with the COVID-19. Some people will develop this illness, and they will hardly have symptoms, and they won't need to be hospitalized, and then they quickly, or they heal. They may be even asymptomatic, not show any symptoms at all, or show mild symptoms. And then there are others who get this same illness, and it actually it causes their death. And so we find that there's this huge discrepancy. The same sort of trial is affecting two people very differently. And sometimes I know that there is an issue of age and an issue of people who are immunocompromised, etc. But we're also hearing cases of people who are young, and they say they do not have previous health issues, who are being who have even died of this illness. So the question that's very confusing is, what's the difference? What's the difference between these two different people who are being tried with the same the same virus, really? And the answer really goes back to something called the immune system. That we know that some people, their immune system can fight it off, and other people, the immune system cannot. And that's why it affects people who are immunocompromised more, because their immune system is already suppressed. And there are different things that happen that suppress the immune system further, stress being one of them. But what makes the difference between these two people is the strength of their immune system. The other thing that happens is that once those people who are afflicted with this virus, and they are allowed, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows them to heal, something else amazing happens to that person. And that is, this person now presumably has antibodies, meaning that their body has now fought it off and now has become stronger due to the trial. So they got the coronavirus, they were able to fight it off through their immune system, and now they became stronger, and now they have antibodies for the coronavirus. This is essentially how a vaccine works, is that you give somebody weakened or ineffective antibody, the virus weakened, and then it builds antibodies. And so the idea here is that it's the immune system being able to fight this off, and after that trial, that person actually becomes stronger. Now, here is the thing. What can we do spiritually in order to build this immune system? This is the thing that every single individual is going to be faced with trials. Everyone is going to be faced with, various different tests. But what differentiates one person from another, what differentiates the people who are destroyed by their tests versus those who are actually made stronger by their tests, is the strength of the spiritual immunity, the spiritual immune system. And this is what every single one of us can actually work on strengthening, because when a calamity hits us, at that point, well, it becomes quite difficult at that point to struggle to build our immune system. It's all really about what we do before a calamity hits, right? And so similarly, when it comes to a spiritual trial, or an emotional trial, or a psychological trial. Now, don't get confused, don't get distracted. The point here is not about how coronavirus works or how COVID-19 works. I want to get everyone to shift the focus for a moment, and to shift that focus away from the medical side of this difficulty that we're going through, this challenge. I want us for a moment to shift to the spiritual side of this. Every single person, after this passes, we will continue to be tested in different ways. Some of us are going to be tested financially. Some of us are going to be tested in our relationships. Some of us are going to be tested in our health. Some of us are going to be tested in our wealth. But tests will always come. And so we have to be able to build in a spiritual and emotional and psychological immunity, so that we are not destroyed by every single test that comes our way. Because long after this pandemic has passed, tests are not going to stop for us personally and collectively. So what we have to do is we have to be able to build an internal strength. And in some other circles, this is called resilience. An ability to be able to withstand the tests, an ability to withstand the storms that are going to face us in life. Because our tests are not going to end at COVID-19. Our tests are going to come, and they're going to come in waves throughout our life. And so we have to be able to build an immunity to these tests. And then once we've built that immunity, that internal resilience psychologically and spiritually and mentally, then our tests no longer destroy us. Our tests no longer kill us, but actually make us stronger. And that is the goal of where we want to get to. We want to get to a point where we go through our lives and our tests are not destroying us, they are making us stronger. Now that cannot happen unless we build our spiritual and psychological immunity before the test hits. So, for example, if a storm hits, it's really those people who are already inside the shelter who are going to be protected in the storm. See, if you're just waiting until the hurricane is already, at your doorstep, it's probably a little late at that point. You have to be in shelter before the storm hits. And so what we have to be doing every single day of our life is building that shelter and building that immunity, that spiritual and psychological and mental immunity before our tests hit. And this is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he says that the people who are close to Allah outside of their difficulty, if you're close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during times of ease, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be close to you during times of hardship. And so we're taught this principle that if we want the help and the protection and the immunity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, I'm talking about spiritual and psychological immunity, moving away from the whole discussion of COVID-19 specifically and literally. But if we want to be able to have this internal resilience and this immunity, the ability to grow through our trials instead of being destroyed by them, if we want to have that ability, then we have to be building the relationship with God, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout our lives before we are struck with that calamity. And in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that if you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hear your calls, to hear your dua in times of difficulty, then call on Him during times of ease. And again, there's that principle that the way we are during our times of ease becomes a reflection of how we will be during times of hardship. And so just practically, what are some things that we can do, and especially taking advantage of this month of Ramadan, that we can start to become stronger internally, that we can become spiritually stronger, that we can build a stronger spiritual and psychological immune system? What are some of the things that we can do? Well, first and foremost, we have to make the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just like we breathe, just like oxygen. The remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala needs to be a regular part of our lives, because that is what is strengthening the heart and strengthening the mind and the soul. It is literally the food and oxygen of the soul is the dhikr, the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, the most essential part of that and the most essential manifestation of that is the salah, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, whenever He talks about salah, He says iqam as-salah, meaning to establish prayer. Prayer cannot just be something we do during our hardships. Prayer cannot just be something we do on Friday, or we do on Eid, or we do only in Ramadan, because prayer has to be like breathing. It has to be like eating. It's that thing that is giving our heart and our soul the oxygen it needs and the food it needs to be able to have that immunity, to be able to have that resilience and that strength to withstand the trials that will surely come, to withstand the weather, the storms that will surely come along our path. And so we have to be a people of remembrance. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, not only, when Allah talks about dhikr in the Quran, He says, kathiran. He adds kathiran, yadhkurullah kathiran, that they remember Allah a lot. We can't be a people who only remember Allah during our times of hardship. That's like the person who sees the storm at their doorstep and then starts to think about going to shelter. We have to already be in the shelter before the storm hits in order to be protected. And so the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is essential. And there are different ways that we can do that. And we see that this is the month of the Quran. We need to build a habit of having a relationship with the Quran daily. This is the food of the soul. This is literally the food and the oxygen that is building our immunity, our spiritual and mental and psychological immunity. And realize that this is also psychological. This isn't only spiritual strength that we're building, but we're also building mental strength and psychological strength. This is how we build resilience, is by having a regiment of regular dhikr, of remembering Allah a lot. And through our salah, and through the Quran, and through the adhkar that the Prophet ﷺ has taught us, that he used to say throughout his day. This was the example that he gave us of how to be able to be successful in this life, and how to be able to not only survive inside of our storms, but actually thrive inside of our storms. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم إنه غفور رحيم. سبحانك الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خيرا. And I pray that you all have a blessed Ramadan, and all of your families are healthy and safe.